Maya Rodriguez moved through the crowded room like she'd done 1,000 times before. Her hands balanced the silver tray perfectly, her steps were quiet, and her face showed nothing. That's what 3 years of serving drinks at the Meridian Club had taught her. Be invisible. Don't speak unless spoken to. Smile politely and disappear. The club wasn't like regular bars where people laughed loud and clinked glasses. This place was different. The carpets were thick enough to swallow footsteps. The walls were covered in dark wood that probably cost more than most people's cars. And the members? They were the kind of people who shaped the world with a single phone call. Maya was 27, but sometimes she felt much older. There was a time when she had dreams bigger than carrying champagne bottles. She'd gone to college for art history. She'd stayed up late writing papers about painters and their techniques. She'd imagined herself working in galleries, maybe even big museums someday. But life had other plans. Her mother got sick 2 years ago. Cancer. The kind that doesn't care about dreams or college degrees. The medical bills came fast and they came heavy. Insurance covered some, but not enough. Never enough. Maya watched her savings disappear. Then she watched her dreams follow. The gallery internship she'd applied for. She never showed up for the interviews. The museum positions. She couldn't afford to take unpaid work, so she put her degree in a drawer and picked up a serving tray instead. That's just how it goes sometimes. Tonight felt different, though. The entire East Wing was closed off for a private party. James Chen was celebrating his 45th birthday. Maya had served him before. He wasn't like the others. He remembered names. He said thank you. He looked at people like they were actually people. But tonight even he seemed distracted. Maya refilled water glasses during dinner, trying to stay in the background like always. But she couldn't help overhearing the conversation. It was hard not to when voices got stressed and urgent. James had bought a painting at an auction. A Rothko. The name made Maya's heart skip even though she tried to stay focused on her work. Mark Rothko was one of the painters she'd studied obsessively in college. Those huge canvases with floating rectangles of color. Simple to look at, impossible to forget. But there was a problem. Someone thought the painting might be fake. The expert who was supposed to check it had gotten sick and ended up in the hospital, and James only had 3 days left to verify the painting was real or walk away from the deal. Millions of dollars hung in the balance. Maya kept pouring water, her hand steady even though her mind was racing. She glanced at the photograph on the table. Just a quick look. That's all it took. Her years of study kicked in automatically, noticing details, cataloging information, seeing things that others missed. The orange in the painting. Something about it was off. She should have kept quiet. That's what servers do. They see everything and say nothing. But Maya's foot caught the edge of the antique rug. She stumbled forward, catching herself on the table. Her hand landed right on the photograph, and before she could stop herself, words came out. The orange is wrong. The room went completely silent. Maya felt every eye turned toward her. Her heart hammered so hard she thought everyone must hear it. What had she just done? You don't interrupt these people. You don't insert yourself into conversations worth more money than you'll see in your entire life. James looked at her. Really looked at her. Not the polite glance he usually gave. This was different, intense, curious. What did you say? His voice wasn't angry. It was interested. Maya's throat went dry. She could see her supervisor across the room, his face turning red. She was going to get fired. Of course she was. But James was still waiting for an answer. I'm sorry, Mr. Chen, I shouldn't have said anything. The words came out automatically, the practiced apology of someone who'd learned to make herself small. No. James leaned forward. Tell me what you meant. What's wrong with the orange? This was her moment to back away, to apologize again and disappear into the background where she belonged. But something in his expression stopped her. He genuinely wanted to know. So Maya took a breath and decided to be brave for maybe the first time in 3 years. Rothko mixed his own paints, she said, her voice getting steadier. He was really particular about it. In 1958, when that painting was supposedly made, he used a specific type of orange, cadmium orange with a special binder. And here's the thing about those colors. They change over time. They develop this rust-like undertone after decades. It's really subtle, but it's always there in real Rothkos from that period. She gestured carefully toward the photograph. That orange is too bright, too stable. It looks like what someone would paint if they studied Rothko, but not like what Rothko actually painted. The silence felt like it lasted forever. Then one of James's advisors laughed. Not a nice laugh, a dismissive one. Well, Mr. Chin, apparently your server thinks she knows more than art experts. But James wasn't laughing. He was studying Maya the way someone studies something valuable. How do you know all this? I studied art history in college, Maya said quietly. She felt embarrassed suddenly. Her state school degree versus these people's Ivy League backgrounds. I focused on American painters from after World War II. I wrote my thesis on Rothko, how his colors related to his mental state, how they changed over the years. Where did you study? James asked. Maya felt her cheeks get hot. State college. Nothing fancy. She didn't mention the Met internship she'd been accepted to, the one she never got to do because her mother got sick and money disappeared and dreams became luxuries she couldn't afford. James stood up suddenly. Maya stepped back instinctively, but he wasn't angry. His eyes had that look people get when they're calculating something, figuring out odds. Are you absolutely sure about what you just told me? He asked. Maya nodded. I'd need to see the actual painting to be completely certain. But just from that photograph, I'd have serious doubts. James turned to his team. Get the painting here, tonight. James, this is ridiculous. The advisor who'd laughed earlier was protesting now. We can't base a $60 million decision on what a server. My authentication expert is in the hospital. James cut him off. I have less than 3 days to verify this purchase, and this young woman just noticed something none of you saw. He looked back at Maya. What's your name? Maya Rodriguez, sir. Maya Rodriguez. He said it like he was testing how it sounded. Then he smiled slightly. I'm going to make you an offer. Actually, let's call it a dare. You're going to look at this Rothko tonight. You're going to tell me if it's real or fake. And if you're right, whichever way it goes, I'm going to pay off whatever debt made someone with your knowledge hide behind a drinks tray. Maya's supervisor looked like he might faint, but Maya barely noticed him. She was staring at James, trying to process what he'd just said. And if I'm wrong? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. James's smile got a little wider. Then you go back to serving drinks and we pretend this never happened. But I don't think that's going to happen. He held out his hand. Do we have a deal? Maya looked at his extended hand. Then she looked at all the faces around the table. Some looked skeptical. Some looked amused. All of them were waiting to see what the invisible server would do. She'd thought about her mother's medical bills sitting on her kitchen counter. She thought about her thesis gathering dust in a drawer. She thought about 3 years of making herself smaller and quieter and less. Maya reached out and shook his hand. Her grip was firm. We have a deal. The painting arrived just after midnight. Maya had never seen so much security for a single object. Armed guards flanked a climate-controlled case as it was wheeled into the club's private gallery. An insurance representative followed close behind, looking like he might have a heart attack at any moment. Maya stood to the side, suddenly very aware that she was still wearing her server uniform. Her feet ached from the dinner shift. She probably smelled like champagne and nervousness. And here she was, about to examine a painting worth more money than she could properly imagine. James had cleared the entire gallery. Maya had cleaned this room before, dusting frames and vacuuming corners. But she'd never really looked at it. Not like this. Now the lights were adjusted perfectly, and the space felt almost sacred. When they unveiled the painting, Maya forgot how to breathe. It was massive, nearly 6 feet tall, orange and red rectangles floating against a yellow background. The colors seemed to pulse with their own light. This was what Rothko did. He didn't just put paint on canvas. He created experiences, moments, feelings you couldn't put into words. For several seconds, Maya just stared. This was why she'd fallen in love with art in the first place. That feeling of standing before something that spoke directly to your soul. But she wasn't here to admire it. She was here to question it. James had gathered everyone. His advisors lined the walls like they were waiting for a verdict. Lawyers stood nearby with folders full of documents. Security kept watch. And everyone was looking at her. The server who dared to speak up. Someone handed her gloves. The kind of white cotton gloves she'd worn during her college internship at a small local gallery. It felt like a lifetime ago. Her hands trembled as she put them on. "Take your time," James said from somewhere behind her. "Tell us everything you see." Maya approached the painting slowly. She pulled out the magnifying loupe they'd given her. It was basic equipment, but it would work. She started with the fundamentals the way her professors had taught her. "Okay," she said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "First, I need to look at how the canvas is stretched." One of the advisors sighed loudly. Like this was a waste of his time. Maya ignored him. Rothko stretched his own canvases. He was specific about the tension. Too tight and the paint would crack wrong. Too loose and the colors wouldn't sit right. This. She ran her gloved fingers along the edge. "This feels consistent with his technique." She moved to the signature next. Rothko's signature changed depending on the year and his emotional state. The pressure he used with the pen, the way certain letters connected. In 1958, he was starting to get depressed. His signatures from that period show hesitation, small pauses. She studied the signature carefully. This has those pauses. Hours passed. Maya lost track of time completely. She examined every inch of the canvas. She explained craquelure patterns, the tiny cracks that form in old paint. She talked about how Rothko built his paintings in layers, sometimes 30 or 40 coats of thin color. He called it thin as a veil, Maya said, pointing to a section where you could almost see through the orange to the layers beneath. He wanted depth without weight, transparency without losing intensity. She was teaching now, really teaching, sharing everything she'd spent 4 years learning. The advisors who'd looked bored earlier were leaning in, asking questions. Even the insurance guy seemed interested. But the lead advisor, a man with silver hair and an expensive suit, finally lost patience. "This is all very educational, Ms. Rodriguez, but we need an answer. Is it real or fake?" Maya stepped back from the painting. Her heart was pounding so hard it hurt. This was it. The moment everything hinged on. If she was wrong, she'd go back to being invisible. If she was right, her life would change in ways she couldn't even imagine. She thought about the orange. The layers. The signature. The feeling of the canvas. Every technical detail pointed to authenticity. But something was still wrong. "It's a forgery," Maya said quietly. "A really, really good one. But it's not real." The room exploded. Everyone started talking at once. The insurance representative looked relieved and panicked at the same time. The advisors were arguing with each other. One lawyer was already on his phone. James held up his hand. The room went silent. "Explain," he said. Just that one word. Maya turned back to the painting. Her mouth was dry, but her mind was clear. The forger knew Rothko inside and out. They studied his techniques perfectly. But they made 3 mistakes. She pointed to the lower section of the painting. First, the orange. Like I said at dinner, it lacks the oxidation pattern. Real Rothko oranges from 1958 would have changed over 60-plus years. This hasn't. Second, she held up the UV light they'd given her. Rothko hated varnish. He thought it created a barrier between the viewer and the painting. He wanted nothing between you and the color, but this painting has a micro-thin layer of modern fixative. You can only see it under UV light, but it's definitely there. Rothko would never have approved that. The silver-haired advisor was shaking his head. 2 technical details. That's not enough to... There's a third reason, Maya interrupted. She was surprised by her own boldness. But she'd come this far. The emotion is wrong. The emotion? The advisor's voice dripped with sarcasm. You're basing a $60 million decision on emotion? Maya turned to face him directly. Rothko painted his psychological state. That's not speculation. That's documented fact. He said it himself. His paintings were about expressing basic human emotions. Fear, ecstasy, doom, tragedy. She gestured to the canvas. In 1958, Rothko was transitioning into his dark period. The depression that would eventually take his life was starting to show up in his work. His colors were becoming heavier. More somber. more introspective. Maya looked back at the painting. This is too optimistic. The colors are too bright, too hopeful. It's what someone who studied Rothko would paint if they were trying to make a 1958 Rothko. But it's not what Rothko himself would have painted when he was sliding into depression. It's technically perfect but emotionally false. The silence that followed felt endless. Maya's legs were shaking. She'd just called out a forgery in front of some of the most powerful people in the art world. If she was wrong, her credibility was destroyed before it even began. Then James started laughing. Not the cruel laugh his advisor had given earlier. This was genuine, delighted, the laugh of someone who'd just won a bet. "Get the auction house on the phone," he said to one of his assistants. "We're pulling out of the sale." He turned to Maya, and his expression was something she'd never seen directed at her before. Respect. "Ms. Rodriguez, how much debt are you carrying?" Maya blinked. "What? Your debt? The medical bills. How much do you owe?" Her voice came out as a whisper. $247,000. James pulled out his phone. His thumbs moved quickly across the screen. Then he held it up so Maya could see. A bank transfer. Initiated right there in front of everyone. $250,000. To her, Maya's knees buckled. She grabbed the back of a nearby chair to keep from falling. The numbers on the screen didn't seem real. Nothing about this felt real. "The extra $3,000 is your consultation fee for tonight," James said casually, like he'd just tipped her for good service. "Your debt is paid." Maya couldn't speak. Couldn't think. $247,000. The weight that had been crushing her for 2 years. Gone, just like that. "But that's not all," James continued. "I made you a promise. I said if you were right, I'd fund whatever it takes to put you where you should have been. So here's my question, Maya Rodriguez." He paused, letting the moment stretch. "Where should you have been?" Maya looked at the painting, then at James, then at all the faces watching her. She thought about the med internship she'd never taken, the gallery positions she'd never applied for, the dreams she'd buried under bills and exhaustion. "I don't know," she admitted. Her voice was shaking now, but not from fear, from possibility. "I gave up on that version of myself a long time ago." James smiled. "Then I guess we'll have to figure it out together. Because Maya, someone with your eye and your knowledge doesn't belong behind a drinks tray, and I'm going to make sure the world knows it." He extended his hand again, not for a handshake this time. "For partnership. Welcome to your new life," he said. Maya took his hand, and for the first time in 3 years she felt like she could breathe. Maya didn't sleep that night. She sat in her tiny apartment, the same place where she'd cried over rejection letters and medical bills, and watched the sun come up over the city. Her phone kept buzzing with bank notifications confirming the transfer. Real money. Real change. Real freedom. But she couldn't stop thinking about James's question. Where should you have been? She'd spent 3 years trying not to think about that. It hurt too much to imagine the life she could have had, the galleries she might have worked in, the collections she might have helped curate, the art she might have saved or discovered. She'd locked all of that away because surviving was hard enough without mourning what could have been. Now the lock was broken, and Maya had no idea who she was supposed to become. The answer came 3 days later. A courier arrived at her apartment with a thick envelope. Inside was a formal letter on expensive paper. The Chen Art Foundation. Maya had never heard of it. As she read, she realized why. James had created it specifically for this. For her, the position was Director of Authentication and Acquisitions. The job description made her head spin. She'd be building a team to revolutionize how the art world verified and valued contemporary works. She'd consult on major acquisitions. She'd train other authenticators. She'd have resources and authority and respect. The salary made her sit down hard on her second-hand couch. It wasn't just enough to live on. It was enough to actually have a life. But there was more. A second letter, this one from Columbia University. James had enrolled her in their master's program for art history and archaeology. She'd work at the foundation 3 days a week and study 2 days. In 2 years, she'd have the credentials to make every gallery and museum in the world take her seriously. Maya's hands shook as she read the letters again. And again, making sure they were real. She met James for coffee the following week. Not at the Meridian Club where she'd served him drinks. At a regular cafe where normal people sat and talked. though nothing about this conversation was normal. "I don't know what to say," Maya admitted, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup. Real coffee. The good kind, not the instant package she'd been surviving on. "Say yes," James replied simply. "And stop calling me Mr. Chen, it's James." Maya laughed nervously. "That's going to take some getting used to." "You know what I see when I look at you, Maya?" James leaned forward, his expression serious. "I see someone who let the world convince them they were small. I built a $15 billion company because I was too stubborn to believe I was small. That Rothko forgery would have cost me $60 million and destroyed my reputation as a serious collector. You saved me because you had the courage to be big for about 30 seconds. He paused, letting that sink in. Imagine what you could do if you stayed big. The next 18 months became a blur. Maya had never worked so hard in her life, but it was different from the exhausting grind of double shifts at the club. This was the kind of tired that came from using your mind, from growing, from becoming. She attended graduate seminars where professors who'd written the textbooks she'd studied were now her teachers. She worked authentication cases that appeared in the news. She consulted on pieces worth more than entire buildings. And slowly, carefully, she built something she'd lost somewhere along the way. Confidence. Her first major case was a disputed painting by Jean-Michel Basquiat. A nervous collector had paid $3 million for it but started having doubts. Maya spent 2 weeks examining every detail. She traced the paint composition, studied the canvas weave, analyzed the signature until she could recreate it blindfolded. It was real. The collector cried with relief. Then there was the Frida Kahlo self-portrait discovered in a Miami estate sale. No one knew it existed. The family thought it was just an old painting their grandmother had owned. Maya authenticated it in a marathon 14-hour session, confirming it was genuine. The painting sold for $18 million. The family who'd been about to lose their home was saved. She built a database of pigment signatures that caught the attention of the FBI's art crime team. They started calling her for consultations. Maya Rodriguez, who'd served drinks 18 months ago, was now helping the federal government catch art forgers. But her reputation was still building. Still fragile. She was the server who got lucky. The girl James Chen took a chance on. She needed something bigger to prove she belonged in this world. That's when James called her into his office with unusual gravity in his voice. "The Louvre is lending us a Rothko for the Foundation's inaugural exhibition," he said. "It's from his late period, 1969, the year before he died. They want you to do the authentication review." Maya felt her stomach drop. "James, if the Louvre is lending it, their authentication standards are ironclad." "They don't make mistakes." "They don't," James agreed. "But I want our review to be independent. I want your eyes on it. Your expertise. This exhibition will establish the Foundation's reputation." He paused, his gaze steady. "And Maya, it will establish yours. The entire art world will be watching." The painting arrived on a gray Tuesday morning. Maya stood alone in the Foundation's examination room, staring at the canvas before her. It was dark, unbearably dark, deep burgundy and black with barely a whisper of lighter color bleeding through. This was Rothko at the end, when his depression had become overwhelming. When he was painting his own death, Maya began her standard examination. Canvas analysis, pigment testing, UV light examination, signature verification, everything checked out perfectly. The Louvre's documentation was flawless. Every technical marker screamed authenticity. This was, without any doubt, a genuine Rothko. But something was wrong. Maya couldn't name it at first. She spent 3 days with the painting. She missed classes. She canceled appointments. She barely slept. James checked on her twice but didn't push, trusting her process. On the third night at 2 a.m, Maya was sitting on the floor of the examination room, just staring at the painting. She'd looked at every technical detail 100 times. Everything said it was real. But her gut, that instinct that had identified the forgery, kept screaming that something was off. Then she saw it. Or rather, she saw what wasn't there. The painting was genuine. Every brushstroke was Rothko's. But it wasn't finished. Maya grabbed her phone and called James. She didn't care that it was almost 3 a.m. "It's real," she said when he answered. "But it's not finished. Rothko never completed this painting. James, you need to get to the Foundation right now." An hour later, Maya stood before an assembled team. James was there, still in sweatpants because he'd rushed over. The Louvre's representative appeared on a video screen, looking confused and concerned. Two art historians James had summoned stood nearby. A conservator from the Metropolitan Museum looked skeptical. Maya had spent the past hour pulling together everything she could find. Documentation from Rothko's studio, letters from the period, research about his working process and his struggles with depression in his final year. In late 1969, Rothko was severely depressed, Maya began. Her voice was steady despite her exhaustion. He'd started taking antidepressants that affected how he worked. There are documented cases of him abandoning canvases mid-composition because he felt his judgment was compromised by the medication. She directed everyone's attention to the lower left section of the painting. Look at this area. Rothko built his paintings in thin layers, sometimes 30 or 40 coats deep. This section only has 12 layers. Compare it to the upper right, which has 38. He stopped mid-process. The Louvre representative, Dr. Catherine Moreau, leaned toward her camera. Ms. Rodriguez, we have letters from Rothko's estate executor confirming this painting was completed and sold after his death. Are you suggesting our documentation is wrong? Maya took a deep breath. This was it. The moment where she either proved herself or destroyed her credibility forever. She was about to contradict one of the most prestigious museums in the world. I'm suggesting, Maya said carefully, that Rothko's estate was under enormous financial pressure after his suicide. They needed to sell paintings. I've traced this work's provenance back to his studio inventory. It's listed as Composition 67B in progress. 3 weeks after that inventory, Rothko changed medications and stopped working on several pieces. 2 months later, he took his life. 6 months after that, his estate executor reclassified 12 unfinished pieces as completed works and sold them. This was one of them. The silence was deafening. Maya had just accused the Louvre of exhibiting an incomplete Rothko as a masterwork for over 30 years. The conservator spoke up. How would we verify this? Maya pulled up her laptop, showing the hundreds of pages she'd compiled. Cross-reference documentation. Studio notes, letters, medical records. A paper trail that told a story the art world had never wanted to hear. Every brushstroke is authentic, Maya said firmly. This painting is genuine. It's valuable. It's extraordinary. But it's not what Rothko intended the world to see. And that matters. James, who'd been quiet throughout the presentation, finally spoke. What do you recommend? This was the moment. Maya could play it safe. Could suggest they quietly return the painting. Could avoid making waves, or she could be big. I recommend we exhibit it, Maya said, but we tell the truth. Maya stood before the assembled team, her heart pounding but her voice steady. She'd just told one of the world's most prestigious museums that they'd been wrong for 30 years. Now she had to explain what came next. We present it as a window into Rothko's process, not his finished vision, Maya continued. We stop pretending that everything an artist touches becomes sacred, and instead honor the messy human reality of creation. We turn this into an educational moment about artistic intention, mental health, and the ethics of authentication. She looked directly at Dr. Moreau on the video screen. And I think the Louvre should lead that conversation. Dr. Moreau's expression was unreadable. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Maya could feel sweat forming on her back. She just gambled everything on a theory that went against decades of accepted history. Give us a moment, Dr. Moreau said finally, and the screen went blank. James walked over to Maya. That took guts, he said quietly. Or stupidity, Maya replied, her hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. I might have just ended my career before it really started. Or you might have just changed how we think about art forever. James smiled. Either way, you didn't play it safe. That's what matters. The wait felt eternal. Maya paced the examination room, second-guessing every word she'd said. Maybe she was wrong. Maybe she'd missed something. Maybe her interpretation was too radical, too presumptuous. Who was she to rewrite art history? But then she looked at the painting again, at the unfinished section, at the place where Rothko had stopped, unable to continue, and she knew she was right. The video screen flickered back on. Dr. Moreau had been joined by 3 other people. Maya recognized one of them from art journals. The Louvre's director, Ms. Rodriguez, Dr. Moreau began. We've spent the last 2 hours reviewing your documentation and consulting our own archives. We've also spoken with scholars who specialize in Rothko's late period. Maya held her breath. Your research is extraordinary, Dr. Moreau continued. And your conclusion, while controversial, appears to be correct. We have records we never fully examined because we had no reason to question the painting's status. But you're right. This work was never completed. Maya felt her knees go weak with relief. However, the Louvre's director spoke up. This presents us with a significant problem. We've exhibited this painting as a masterwork. We've published scholarship about it. We've allowed it to inform our understanding of Rothko's final period. Admitting this publicly could damage the Louvre's credibility. Maya's relief turned to frustration. This was exactly the kind of thinking that kept truth buried. The need to protect reputation over facts. But before she could speak, Dr. Moreau cut in. Which is why we won't hide it. Ms. Rodriguez is right. This should be an educational moment. We propose a joint exhibition between the Louvre and the Chen Foundation. Rothko Unfinished. We'll combine this piece with archival documentation of his working process. We'll show the world not just the painting, but the story behind it. The human story of an artist struggling with his own mind. The director looked uncomfortable but nodded. Ms. Rodriguez will serve as lead curator. If we're going to do this, we want the person who discovered the truth to tell it. After the call ended and everyone else had left, Maya sat alone in the examination room with the painting. James found her there an hour later, still staring at the dark canvas. You did it, he said simply. You found your voice. Maya turned to look at him. I almost lost it too. I was terrified they'd dismiss me. Tell me I was wrong. Send me back to being invisible. But you spoke up anyway, James said. That's the difference. You could have played it safe. Could have authenticated the painting as complete and moved on. Nobody would have questioned you. But you chose truth over comfort. Maya looked back at the painting. My mom used to say that. Before she got sick. She'd say, Maya, comfort is nice, but truth is necessary. Her voice caught slightly. I think she'd be proud of this. I think she would too, James said softly. The next 6 months were a whirlwind. Maya worked with Dr. Moreau and a team of international scholars to build the exhibition. They gathered documentation from Rothko's studio. They collected letters he'd written in his final year. They found photographs of him working, showing his process, revealing the man behind the mystique. Maya wrote the catalog essay. It took her 3 months and 27 drafts. She wanted every word to be perfect, to honor Rothko's genius while acknowledging his humanity, to show that incompleteness wasn't failure, but part of the creative process. Her essay was published in the Journal of Art History 2 weeks before the exhibition opened. Maya checked her email obsessively, waiting for the criticism she was sure would come. Instead, she found messages from scholars around the world, praising her research, thanking her for opening a new conversation about authenticity and artistic intention. Columbia offered her a teaching position upon completion of her master's degree. The FBI's Art Crime Division asked her to consult on 3 major cases. Gallery owners started calling, wanting her opinion on acquisitions. Maya Rodriguez, who'd been invisible 2 years ago, was becoming a name people knew. But the strangest moment came during a lecture at Columbia. Maya was sitting in the back of the auditorium, taking notes on a presentation about authentication techniques. The professor, an older man who had written definitive texts on the subject, paused his slideshow. Before we continue, he said, I want to acknowledge someone in the audience. Maya Rodriguez is here today. For those who don't know, Ms. Rodriguez recently identified an incomplete Rothko that had been misclassified for decades. Her work is changing how we think about authentication and artistic intention. Maya, would you stand? Maya felt her face burn as heads turned toward her. She stood awkwardly, not knowing what to do with her hands. Ms. Rodriguez's research reminds us that authentication isn't just about technical analysis, the professor continued. It's about truly understanding the artist, their process, their psychology, their humanity. That's the kind of thinking that moves our field forward. The auditorium applauded. Maya sat down quickly, overwhelmed. 2 years ago, she'd been serving drinks to people who didn't see her. Now professors were praising her work in front of future art historians. The exhibition opened simultaneously at the Louvre and the Chen Foundation on a cold November evening. Maya stood in the foundation's gallery, wearing a dress that cost more than she used to make in 2 months. The room was packed with art world elite, critics, collectors, museum directors, people who shaped what the world considered valuable. And they were here because of her work. The painting hung in the center of the space, surrounded by documentation. Studio photographs, letters, a timeline showing Rothko's final year. The story of an incomplete work and the man who couldn't finish it. Maya watched people move through the exhibition. Some looked confused at first, uncomfortable. They'd come expecting to see a masterwork and found something more complicated, more human. But as they read the documentation, as they understood the story, she saw their expressions change. They weren't just looking at a painting anymore. They were witnessing a moment of human struggle and creativity. A young woman approached Maya hesitantly. She was maybe 22, 23, wearing a catering uniform identical to the one Maya had worn 2 years ago. "Excuse me, Ms. Rodriguez," the young woman said nervously. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to say something." "Of course," Maya replied, smiling. "What's your name?" "Sophie." "Sophie Chen." "No relation to Mr. Chen," she added quickly. "I'm an art history major. I'm supposed to graduate next semester, but I've been thinking about dropping out. The debt, you know. It just seems impossible." Maya's heart clenched. She knew that feeling. The weight of impossibility, the slow death of dreams. "But I read about you," Sophie continued, her voice getting stronger, "about how you were serving drinks and then you just spoke up, and it changed everything. You give me hope that maybe I don't have to give up. That maybe it's possible to become who I'm supposed to be." Maya looked at this young woman, at herself from 2 years ago, at every person who'd been told they were too small, too poor, too late to matter. She pulled out her business card. "Sophie, I'm looking for a research assistant. Someone willing to work hard, to question everything, to see what others miss. Are you interested?" Sophie's eyes went wide. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious," Maya said. "Email me tomorrow. We'll talk about hours and pay. Real pay, not unpaid internship nonsense. And Sophie?" Maya paused, making sure the young woman was listening. "Don't drop out. Not because of money. Not because it seems impossible. Impossible things happen every day." As Sophie walked away, clutching the business card like it was made of gold, Maya caught James's eye across the gallery. He raised his glass slightly, a private acknowledgement between two people who'd taken a gamble on each other. Maya stood in the gallery long after most guests had left. The exhibition had been open for 3 hours, and the response was beyond anything she'd imagined. Critics who'd come prepared to be skeptical had left converted. Museum directors were already talking about similar exhibitions exploring the unfinished works of other masters. But Maya wasn't thinking about any of that. She was thinking about Sophie, about the look in that young woman's eyes, the same desperate hope Maya had carried for 3 years while serving drinks and watching her dreams collect dust. James walked over, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "You're supposed to be celebrating," he said, handing her one. "I am celebrating," Maya replied. "Just quietly. That's not your style anymore." James gestured to the crowded room. "Look around. These people came here because of your work. Because you refused to accept the easy answer. You changed how they think about authenticity, about art, about truth itself." Maya took a sip of champagne. It tasted expensive. Everything in her life was expensive now. Good expensive. The kind of expensive that came from earned success, not borrowed credit. "You know what's strange? 2 years ago, I would have given anything to be in this room as a guest. Now I'm here and all I can think about is that girl in the catering uniform." "Sophie," James said. "You heard that conversation?" "I hear everything," James smiled. "It's how I stay ahead. So what are you going to do about her?" Maya turned to look at him. "I offered her a job. I know. But I'm asking what you're really going to do. Because I know you, Maya. You're not satisfied with saving one person. You want to change the system that makes people like Sophie think they have to choose between their dreams and survival." He was right. Maya had been thinking about it for months. Every time she met a talented student drowning in debt. Every time she saw someone brilliant working 3 jobs just to afford textbooks. Every time she remembered her own mother's medical bills destroying her future. "I want to start a program," Maya said slowly, the idea forming as she spoke. "A fellowship for art history students from backgrounds like mine. Full scholarships, paid internships, real mentorship, not charity investment. We find talented people who've been told they're too poor, too late, too whatever, and we prove the world wrong." James's smile widened. "Write me a proposal. The foundation will fund it. But Maya, you're running it. This is your vision. The Rodriguez Fellowship launched 6 months later. The application process was simple. No essays about overcoming adversity, no poverty narratives for wealthy donors to feel good about. Just a portfolio of work and a single question. What do you see that others miss? Sophie was the first fellow. She brought an intensity to the work that reminded Maya of herself. Sharp eyes, endless questions, a refusal to accept surface explanations. Within 3 months, Sophie had identified a pattern in forged impressionist paintings that had eluded experts for years. She was brilliant, and now she had the resources to prove it. But the fellowship meant more than discovering talent. It meant changing the conversation about who belonged in the art world. Maya was invited to speak at a conference on authentication in Paris. The audience was filled with museum directors, auction house specialists, and collectors, people who'd spent decades in the field. 2 years ago, Maya wouldn't have been allowed in the building. Now she was the keynote speaker. We talk about authentication like it's purely technical, Maya began. Canvas analysis, pigment testing, provenance verification, and those things matter. But we forget that art is made by humans. Complicated, struggling, brilliant humans. If we don't understand the artist's humanity, we can't truly authenticate their work. She showed slides of the Rothko, the incomplete sections, the documentation of his struggles. This painting taught me that sometimes what's missing tells us more than what's there. Rothko couldn't finish this work because finishing it would have meant lying about his emotional state. In his incomplete brushstrokes, we see more truth than we'd find in a completed forgery. The audience was silent, listening. But here's what really matters, Maya continued. For decades, the art world accepted this painting as complete because questioning it seemed impossible. The Louvre had authenticated it. Scholars had written about it. Changing our understanding felt too difficult, too uncomfortable. We chose comfort over truth. She paused, letting that sink in. I was a server. I had a degree from a state college nobody had heard of. I had medical debt and no connections and every reason to stay quiet. But I spoke up because I saw something others missed. And that changed everything. Not just for me. For how we think about authentication itself. Maya advanced to the next slide. Photos of the Rodriguez Fellows. Diverse faces. Different backgrounds. United by talent and opportunity. These are the people we almost lost. Students who would have given up on art history because they couldn't afford to pursue it. Each one has already contributed something significant to the field. Because here's the truth we don't want to admit. We've been losing brilliant minds for generations because they couldn't afford entry into our exclusive world. The applause when she finished was thunderous. But more importantly, museum directors approached her afterward, asking about the fellowship, wanting to create similar programs. The conversation was changing. Maya's work with the FBI led to the recovery of 17 stolen masterpieces. Her authentication database became the industry standard. Columbia made her an associate professor before she even finished her doctorate. She was 30 years old and reshaping her entire field. But the moment that mattered most came on a random Tuesday afternoon. Maya was in her office at the foundation, reviewing authentication requests when her assistant knocked. "There's someone here to see you." She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's important. The woman who entered was in her 60s with kind eyes and hands that showed years of hard work. It took Maya a moment to place her. Then recognition hit like a wave. "Mrs. Patterson?" Maya stood up quickly. "From the hospital?" Mrs. Patterson had been her mother's primary nurse during those final terrible months. She'd held Maya's hand when the prognosis came back. She'd sat with her mother when Maya had to work double shifts to pay for treatments that weren't working. "I wasn't sure you'd remember me," Mrs. Patterson said softly. "I remember everyone from that time," Maya replied. "Please sit. What brings you here?" Mrs. Patterson pulled an envelope from her purse. "Your mother gave me this before she passed. She made me promise to only give it to you when you'd found your way. She said I'd know when the time was right." She handed Maya the envelope. "I saw you on the news last week talking about your fellowship program. I think it's time." Maya's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside was a letter in her mother's handwriting. "Weak and shaky, written in those final weeks, my beautiful Maya," it began. "If you're reading this, it means you remembered who you are. Not the girl paying my medical bills. Not the girl serving drinks to forget her dreams. The real you, the one who sees truth in colors and stories and brushstrokes. I'm sorry my illness took your future, but I know you'll find it again. You're too stubborn not to. Don't let the world make you small. Don't let fear make you invisible. Speak up, be big. Make them see you. I already do. I always have. I'm so proud of who you're becoming. Love, Mom. Maya couldn't see through her tears. Mrs. Patterson quietly placed a box of tissues on the desk and stood to leave, giving her privacy. But Maya stopped her. Wait, Maya said, wiping her eyes. Thank you. For taking care of her. For bringing this. For knowing when I needed it. Your mother was special, Mrs. Patterson said. She talked about you constantly. About your art knowledge, your passion. She never doubted you'd find your way back. She paused at the door. She was right to believe in you. After Mrs. Patterson left, Maya sat with the letter for a long time. She thought about the girl who'd put her thesis in a drawer, who'd learned to be invisible, who'd almost accepted that small life as permanent. Then she thought about the woman she'd become. The woman who'd spoken up about an orange pigment, who'd challenged the Louvre, who'd created opportunities for others, who'd refused to stay small. That evening, Maya returned to the Meridian Club for the first time since she'd left. Not to serve drinks. She'd been invited to speak at a fundraiser for arts education. The same room where she'd once been invisible was now hosting her as the guest of honor. She stood at the podium, looking out at the wealthy, powerful people who'd once looked through her. 2 years ago, I was serving you drinks in this room, she began. Most of you don't remember me. I was good at being invisible. It's what servers do. We see everything and say nothing, she smiled. But then I saw something I couldn't stay quiet about. An orange that was wrong. And I made a choice. I chose to be visible. To speak truth even when it was uncomfortable. To be big even when the world wanted me small. Maya looked directly at the servers standing along the walls. Young people in uniforms, holding trays, being invisible just like she'd been. This speech isn't for the people at the tables. It's for you. The ones standing. The ones watching. The ones dreaming bigger than this room. Whatever gift you're hiding, whatever talent you've buried to survive, don't let it stay buried forever. The world needs what only you can see. One of the servers, a young man, met her eyes, and Maya saw it. That flicker of recognition, of hope, of possibility. After the event, he approached her. Miss Rodriguez? I'm studying architecture. But the debt, he trailed off. Maya handed him her card. Email me tomorrow. Let's talk about what you see that others miss. Because that's what Maya Rodriguez did now. She found people the world had taught to be invisible, and she dared them to be seen, just like someone had once dared her.